Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Teacher's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Brian Costello, here to talk with some incredible educators and hear the stories that have made them who they are today.
Good.
Welcome back to the Teacher's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Brian Costello, and I'm super excited to be back after what's been a really, really long layoff for me recording and sharing stories with all of you, in large part due to the fact that I have had very little voice to share stories with all of you for quite some time. So, a handful of illnesses here and there have between myself and my family just kind of knocked me out. But I'm excited to jump back in. I have a friend who's here to share some of his stories and experiences, and he has a lot of really interesting stories and experiences for us, I'm sure. Just from knowing him for the past few years, I know that he's going to have some really interesting things to share with us. So really excited to share and have my friend Micah Shippee on the program. 8th grade history teacher from the Syracuse, New York area. He's a consultant who does some really amazing work. I've seen a lot of cool things that he's done over the past few years. And keynote speaker who's available. After you hear him on this podcast, you're all going to be lining up to book him. It's going to be amazing. But yeah, Micah, thanks for coming on tonight and joining me to share a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Cool.
Absolutely. I'm just really excited because I've known you for, it's crazy. It's almost 3 years now that it's been since we met in Toronto at the Google Innovator Academy. And you are, every time I see you popping up in different places doing all these amazing things, I'm thinking, wow, he's got to have some interesting stories to share. But all those stories started somewhere, right? So tell me about when you realized that you were going to go into education. What was that moment like?
I was really young, late elementary school. I knew I wanted to be part of the school I was going to. My parents sent me to a very small faith-based school, which was pre-K through 12th grade. My mom was the kindergarten teacher. It wasn't what I'd call a prep school or a school with a lot of resources, but the people there, a lot of them, like my mom, were volunteers. It was kind of neat. And people were there because they loved children and loved their community that they were working with. And so all I knew about teachers in my experience was that they were happy and poor.
I think that's a solid base to go off of. And then you're like, I want to be happy and poor. So
yeah, well, money didn't really mean anything, when you're little. You just see,
oh, yeah.
You recognize true love. You recognize what it really means to give by what people are doing, and it's simple, right? So I grew up with a hug in the inside, the one that matters, that was really making me feel like it was it was what I was supposed to do. So I went to university to learn to be a teacher, to learn the craft of teaching. I felt that the professional credential and the degree and the experience would help me to go back to that community and contribute. So I spent most of my career ready to leave public education and take a pay cut and go to the school. And that was my calling, if you will, that I was ready for. So I taught every single year of my middle school career. I'm on year 19. I taught every single year as if it was my last. I would start every school year, every September up here in New York. I'd think, this could be the last year, so I'm going to make the most of it. It come down to May or June towards the end of the school year, and I was thinking, maybe I won't be back here next fall, and that's okay. I hope I made the most of it. So I feel like that approach to teaching helped me to kind of leave everything on the table with each lesson. I don't want to overly romanticize that. That's not every day. But I think in general, I had that approach that I wasn't going to be there long.
Yeah, I think I like that because, one, it's not every day. We all know that. we like to say every day, every single kid, every single day, all the time, but we know there are some days that it just isn't. It isn't there. Like, you do your best you can, just like kids. They do the best they can some days, and that's all I got. But I love the idea just because it's like when you don't necessarily plan for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years of your career at the school, you don't feel like, oh, well, this is something I can reuse. This is something I can do again. You just like, this is really awesome. Let's do this. Like, this is going to be great. This is something kids are going to get a lot out of. Let's go ahead and do it. And I noticed, like, for myself, especially once I started like switching grades back and forth, or like when I knew I had to teach the same kids again the following year, there are things to be like, well, I'm not going to do this with these guys this year because I know that it's better in the things that they're supposed to be learning. It fits just better with them next year. And so you skip it with a certain group of kids, and then some of those kids aren't there the next year, or you don't have the same group, or things change in the summer, and then all of a sudden you miss the chance. So I like that. So tell me about, like you said, you kind of got out, you went to school was, you got your teaching credential, which when you decided, like, I want to go back to the school, I'm going to work at the school, and this, you said you've been there 19 years now, which is amazing. What was the first day like when you went back to the school and you were now the teacher, and
maybe that's actually only part one of a long story. So my motivation to become a teacher was to learn the craft of teaching and go back to the school. I'm still not there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I continued the craft to learn to teach in public education, where I still am, and expected for many years that I would go back to the school. I communicated it with leadership, a lot of smiles and nods, and my belief was that I was to go back as a leader in the school. So I went back to Syracuse University and earned my PhD in instructional design, development, and evaluation, which is all about connecting contents and individuals or users. So it's a broad approach to understanding instruction as a bridge that bridges the gap between a person and a content. And I was intending to learn how to help other people who didn't have a teaching credential to understand good practice, particularly in that school where I came from. My mom was a kindergarten teacher there, and she didn't have her college degree. So that did not make her a poor teacher. It just, maybe there was a few gaps that I could connect for her. So that's kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, and it's something it's funny you said that, you put it that way, because it's something I wrote about with, like, when I was writing about where teachers come from, and I'm thinking to myself, if you're a teacher who skipped that whole college teaching experience, which I did, I know that for myself, there were things that I just didn't know. Like, right. It wasn't that I couldn't do the hands-on in the classroom stuff. I knew how to talk to kids. I knew how to work with kids because I learned how to teach in a classroom. But the higher level stuff, the concept stuff that would, like you said, bridging the gaps between curriculum and content, that stuff, it was harder for me to come by until I went back to school. I didn't get it. So that content connection it's just funny. So like when I went to the interview I had for my first job, the superintendent she's superintendent principal. Is a small school, like kind of like the one you're talking about, but a public school. So it's 150 kids in the school. They're looking for a kindergarten teacher who had experience dealing with kids who needed to be restrained, which was one of my first jobs as an aide in a classroom when I went back to learn how to teach. Like, we need a guy who's strong enough to keep this kid from, like, throwing desks at somebody else. And so they trained me in nonviolent crisis intervention and everything. So, but anyway, I'm in this interview with this superintendent, and she's asking me about, what was it? She was asking me about how, universal design for learning. And so I'm like, yeah, I have no idea what that is. I was just like, I'm going to be honest, I'm not really sure what you're talking about. I was like, I read about that the other day, but I really don't know what it is. And then I just started describing what I would be doing in the classroom. And it was like maybe a couple of hours, like I went home and like pick the article up that I remembered reading that was about universal design for learning. And it was almost exactly what I was talking about, was exactly the thing that, that this article described. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. But I didn't even know that's what it was, or why or why it was something that people wanted to do.
Yeah. And that is the beauty of it, is we know good practice is working because we can see it working, but it's nice to know why it's working. And that way we can replicate it. My mother taught kindergarten for 10 years. After I got my college degree, she went and got hers, and in teaching, and became an ESL teacher, which I thought was super cool. But she had a hard time in college listening to professors talk about certain pedagogy that she knew was dated and wouldn't work and wasn't responsive enough to students. And, that's, I think, the older we get, when we take a course, we're no longer trying to punch a clock to get a credential. We're trying to get something out of it. I think that's fair to say for a lot of adult learners.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. So when you go to a workshop or a session, or you go into somebody's an event, you want to learn something. I want to go into something that, and as I get older and as I do more things, I feel like the amount of places where this can happen are become less and less, unless I'm in the right rooms with the right people. But it's just, I want to learn something new that I can't teach myself by going on YouTube.
Right.
And
that's
hard.
And that was the intent of, earning my, really, truly, the only reason for my PhD was to bring this knowledge back to the school that I felt I was supposed to be at. So, you're probably guessing where the story's going, but I kept communicating with decision makers, got a lot of green lights. And then about 5 years ago, just before you and I met, I was offered the position. Started packing up my classroom to be the principal of this school. And 2 weeks later, the position was taken away from me and given to a relative of one of the decision makers.
Which is unfortunate, but also something that happens. It happens.
It does. I think every one of us has been through heartbreak, and those who haven't will. It's part of the human condition.
Yeah.
But that really sent me in a tailspin that really had me questioning what I was doing in my classroom, what I was doing as a professional, and frankly, what now? What do I do now? So things started to move for me in a positive direction pretty quickly. I met some professional consultants at ISTE, which a colleague of mine was going to go, and I had never been. He had to cancel his trip and gave me his ticket. Wow. I went, and Lisa Thuman at Ed Tech Team, their booth at ISTE, and I had never even heard of private professional development. It wasn't super common where I was from in New York, upstate New York.
Yep.
And talk about things falling into the right place at the right time. Shortly after, it was the Innovator Academy with you, and it's only been really awesome. I'm still in the classroom. I never have viewed it as a negative thing. Just I didn't think it was where I would be this long.
Yeah. Well, so let's go back to that point, because I think you're in a tough place, and I think this is a good thing for people to hear this part of the story, because one of the things I think is most difficult when you look at educators who are really successful and they're sharing that on social media is you see the awesome stuff and you see how great everything is, and you don't hear about the 5 years ago point in your time where you're like, what on earth am I doing with my life? And I had, probably around the same time as you, I was a finalist for 3 principal positions or vice principal positions in a 4-month span.
Yeah.
And I was a runner up for all of them. It was like one right after the other. It was brutal. And I was missing days from my classroom to go do these interviews, and I was so sure. And then all of a sudden, you find out that. And it wasn't even like, it would be like somebody who I went to school with, who I was in my master's program with. I'm like, I like that guy, but I can't believe they picked him and not me. And you're just like, what happened? What am I doing wrong? And so talk about just, so you were having a hard time just figuring out what was going on. You were disappointed, obviously, because that was kind of your ambition.
Sure.
So where do you go for, like, you met some people, but like how do you pick the pieces up and move forward there? Like, what was that like? Did you have people help you push through it? Did you just kind of, suffer through it alone a little bit? Like, what was the process by which you pulled yourself out of that?
Yeah, first of all, I still 4 or 5 years later still can't talk about that kind of heartbreak as past tense. It's still very I don't know why. It's something that won't go away.
Yeah.
I will say I can't could never profess that I went through it alone. My wife is a very, very supportive of me and my biggest fan. And without her, things would have been a lot darker, frankly. So it's important to surround yourself with people who know how to help you feel that you're not crazy. Also know how to not put fuel on the fire. And I don't know how to recommend finding those types of people to other people, but I do know to say that, surround yourself with people who truly love you, and you can get through the downs in life. I mean, frankly, if everything is like you said, if everything was the positive stuff we see on social media, then there's a lot being hidden.
And there is, there really is. It's difficult. And I remember when I first started this whole thing, and it's funny, I got my little message from Twitter that was like, "This is your 5-year Twitter anniversary." And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, it's been 5 years. But I just remember, how I looked at all the people doing everything. I think I could do all that stuff. That's not I could do that stuff. It's not complicated. So I tried to do all that stuff, and it was a total disaster. I couldn't do all that stuff, at least not the first time. Everything was a mess. So it's one of those things where you don't see that, and people will look and see the things that you're doing, and they'll say, Micah's doing this and Micah's doing that, and he's been in this place, he's doing all these great things, and I saw him talk at this place, and he was at this conference doing these things, and just yeah, but man, he's been through some of the same things that you've been through. It's such an important thing to understand about all this, is that we're all human beings who've been through a lot of the same difficult roads. And so one of the things that's helped me a lot, because like you said, it's hard not to think about that as a point of kind of heartbreak as a present tense. And while I love what I do at the moment, when I got into teaching thinking I was going to be a principal. That was what I thought I wanted to do from the beginning.
Sure.
Mainly because my first month as an aide in a classroom and a sub and everything else, I had an amazing principal who invested in me to try and make me better. And that's what I wanted to do. I was I want to do that for other people. And so not getting that was brutal. But then to think about where I've been and who I've been there for during the times that maybe I haven't been, that I wouldn't have been there if I was in this other place. I was in the right place. I was in the right place when I needed to be. And that keeps popping back up for me over and over again. I'm where I need to be. And so,
I mean, for me, I've done several things that, I don't know if you can call them cathartic, but have, I think, turned out okay for me. Because I threw into doing more work. I was thinking more about how I would develop relationships with students. And I have a positive relationship with all of my past students. They're in their 30s now. I feel so old, but I do. They were friends on Facebook and all that, and I knew them when they were 11. But I don't feel that I invested time with them in the classroom as much as I could have. I coached for almost 2 decades as well, and I felt like I had good relationships there. But the average student in my classroom, in reflecting back, I thought, there's something I need to step up my game on. and not just think about, let them have a good experience right now. It's let them think of me as a resource beyond the grade that I'm teaching. And I don't really did that much prior to this experience in my life. So for me, I made some shifts. I added a student broadcast team. So I don't get paid to do it. It's like teaching a sixth class or an extra class. I just do it. So we have a broadcast, and I tried to do events with students in my building and connect with them outside of school and just focus on that relationship piece, because that's the reason I got into it to begin with, was people who had a heart for service and relationship and community. And yet I was looking to join a community temporarily and then jump ship. So it's kind of a rehashing of my how I do things. And so those are just small changes, but having the opportunity to work with other teachers across the world has helped me to reflect back on my practice and help me to realize, I can help people outside of my 4 classroom walls while still being in my 4 classroom walls. So that's been important. It's been a little bit of a tug as well, because I love students. I love teaching. I love working with colleagues, but I feel like I could help more people if I wasn't locked into an 8 to 3 4-wall classroom. So that's been a bit of a struggle as well. How do I navigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of us have that same struggle, because it really is difficult. You want to, spread your influence and help as many people as you possibly can in that sort of way. Is how can I be most helpful? And people who have that mentality of education as a service, and this is what we do this because we want to do great things for other people and for kids and provide them with opportunities. And you think, I am providing, I taught in a tiny school for a long time. So I had, 15 to 20 kids a year, thinking I taught for my first, 8 years that I worked in the school before I moved to this much larger district. I taught less kids in my first 8 years than I did. And a lot of them I taught a second time. So like actual kids that I impacted, even if you count some of the kids that were in the school that I didn't teach. I'm talking less kids than I taught my first year at this like larger middle school. And I'm thinking, wow, I want to have more influence. And I had a moment like that when, when I was a younger teacher, I thought, man, I know what I'm doing. I'm great at this. And so in my little tiny slice of nothing, I was picked for Teacher of the Year. And I'm like, oh, of course, yeah, I'm great at this. Of course I was. And I'm going to fill out the state Teacher of the Year forms, because I think I have a shot at this thing. So I get there to the banquet, and I'm listening to the stuff that the actual like finalists have on their resumes, the things that they did. And I'm thinking, man, they're amazing. And I am like a complete fraud. Like I have nothing on these people. I have no idea what, like, I'm not even in the same league as the stuff these people are doing for kids, not just in their class, but in their buildings, outside their schools. It's unbelievable. And I need to be so much more than what I am. And that was like an eye-opening moment for me like that, and then it becomes difficult. How do you manage that? How do you?
And you have there's 2 things you're talking about just now that really resonate with me. The last thing is the nature of imposter syndrome. And I keynote almost once a month. I do summit PD development about once a month. I work with thousands of teachers a year. And every single time before I go in front of a classroom, before I go in front of a stage, before I start working with somebody one-on-one, I think to myself, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough.
Hopefully people like me.
So I think when we get to the point where we have an arrogance about us or bravado that's projected beyond competence, overconfidence, it's dangerous. We got to stay humble. We're a technology shifting era where we no longer master device, we master iteration and the ability to change, And the other thing you talked about that really stuck with me, or just kind of popped just now as a light bulb moment, was, it sounds like your first teaching context was similar to my childhood experience. where I graduated with 17 people in my class.
Yep.
We're very close friends today, 20-something years later. And so in my classroom, I started teaching, and there are 600-700 kids in a grade.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, how I help them have a sense of community and togetherness and family that I have. Is it possible for students in a ridiculously large setting like that to have that kind of experience? I feel like I found some of it as a soccer coach and as a basketball coach. I found more of it recently within the last 4 years doing, a broadcast crew where we do a live broadcast every day. And I think maybe it's through more diligent effort on my part, but also, really trying to give them an opportunity to feel what I felt as a child for my entire K-12 experience.
Yeah. And I totally get that, because I think, like, I still miss the school where I was working before. Just it was no longer a place where I could do the work that I wanted to do, for a lot of reasons. And I don't want to badmouth the school or the people who work there, because there's amazing people work here. And I still love I'm friends with a lot of the families and the people from the district, and I love them. And I love that place. Like, it was just awesome. But my classroom, I would tell the kids, because I taught kindergarten, I taught first grade, I taught second grade. I said, look, you guys are a family. Like, there are 17 or 16 or 15 of you in this class. I said, most of you will still be here in 8th grade, and you will all be in the same class for the next 9 years.
Right.
You will end up being so tired of each other that you can't stand each other. But at the same time, every single one of you will be like a brother or sister. I said, you need to start taking care of each other right now. I said, that's how we have to treat this place. And I found it I was like a hybrid tech coach / teacher for the first 2 years of the bigger school that I'm at. It was so much harder to build that community with kids that, I got to know a lot of the kids, but it was harder to build the community with those kids. I think it's a lot easier that I have a class, like a set class. In each class, we do a lot of they do a lot of smaller group work, and I do a lot of one-on-one, like small group talking with them on the things they're building and working on. So I teach robotics now. So they're working on a project with like 3 or 4 people, and then I'll come around and work with them on the project. But it's a chance to also talk with them, and when they're having conversations, and we just talk, and I feel like it's given me a chance to, sometimes less successfully than others, but build community with that smaller group within that class a little bit. So
a time, in the industry, talking about the educator experience, which is of course diffused to our students. We talk about the need for PLCs and PLNs, which are relevant. I agree with that. But we have to remember that there's a culture in our building, and there's a community in our building. It's going to form whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
So we can use our PLN and PLC strategies in the classroom. That's when we're really going to make a difference that transcends, a year of content.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I also just love the point you made about how we have to have, this is going to what's going on in your building makes a big difference, and it's going to resonate in your classroom, and it's going to resonate throughout your building. And so the kind of culture, the kind of, you can't just be outside. You can't just be outside your building. You need people there. You need to have people that you're connecting with, that you're having meaningful conversations with in person, in your building, and improving how things are working in the building for you, and then taking that and obviously transfer to your classroom. So yeah, I think that's super important. And so we definitely, so you kind of raced through and jumped to now, and then we rewound a little bit, and then we kind of stuck ourselves about 5 years in the past. So I want to see, so let's get to the now part a little bit more, because you said, you get to travel around and do events once a month. I just enjoy seeing where you pop up and where they misspell your name on the Starbucks cups, because it's amazing how frequently people can't spell Micah. I almost want to start telling people my name is Micah when I go to Starbucks just to see what I get.
I have a friend that's doing that right now, and she's gotten Michael and Martha because of her Australian accent. I'm like, that's great. She's telling them my name to see what they spell. So,
yeah, that's just, it's amazing. So, you said that the ISTE kind of fell into your lap, and you started talking to people at EdTech Team, and now you get a chance to go ahead and work with people from EdTech Team and EdTech Team events on a regular basis. Just talk about what that's done for you in terms of, one, how do you kind of balance that life of, all right, I'm going here this week, and I'm gone for this 3 or 4 days, and then I'm back, and I have my classroom responsibilities and my family and everything else. Because I know there are a lot of people who look at that and they think, I could probably do that. And I know I have the same issue. Is like there are times when I can go, and there are times when I just can't go, and it becomes difficult. So just talk about how you manage to balance that, and then also what that's done for you in the classroom.
Well, I mean, they go hand in hand, the balance and what it's done. I mean, the work that I've been fortunate to be able to do has pressured me to step up my game in the classroom. I can't be telling people about emergent technology and about going paperless if I'm not doing it myself. So, I've been paperless for 18 months now in my classroom, and I think that's kind of cool. It took me 18 years to get there, but I'm paperless.
Irony, you can't see this because you're all listening to it, but there's a wall full of paper behind Micah right now. And so he's saying this, and I'm like kind of giggling to myself, trying not to laugh. But yeah. there's a wall full of paper behind him as he talks about going paperless, which is amazing. Sorry, go ahead, because that was just
my blood, man. Oh, I wouldn't be a paperless teacher, and I wouldn't be focusing on digital workflow skills with my students if I wasn't doing the consulting work. So I've been very fortunate to have a principal and a superintendent who knows what I'm doing. I'm very transparent about it, and has recognized that the PD I give is also PD that I'm getting. So it goes hand in hand. Fortunately, a great deal of the work is on the weekends. I'm able to get flights out and not miss a lot of school. July and August in upstate New York, we have July and August off, but most of the country's back in school in August. So the United States, anyhow, that's a place where I'm offering PD to people who are going back to school when I'm technically still on vacation. So in my current role, that's been there, but it's a challenge. It's been a challenge. I hope my students know or recognize value. I think they do. My colleagues, they come to me about help on different things, and they know I'm connected. So if somebody wants to try something, I'll say, oh, let me ask Brian, or let me ask this guy, or let me ask them. They do it all the time, that kind of thing. So those connections are the natural fruit of the type of work that I've been fortunate to be able to do.
Yeah, those are really nice. It's one thing is people you hear a lot of times like, oh, everybody needs to be connected. Everybody needs to be, but I know that it's not necessarily going to work for everybody. Like it just doesn't. So it's good to have people around you. Like if you are connected to someone, then they're connected to you, and they have the ability to get. Maybe it's not as quick or as firsthand or whatever, but they have the ability to get some of the resources that you have the ability to get. And so I had the opportunity to share. Like I have a couple of friends at my school, who are starting some new mindfulness and student wellness activities, and someone else that I know from outside of school who's not super far away, has been doing this work for like 4 years and has her kids present this stuff. Like she's got a program that's been running for a while, and it's fantastic, and her kids are really impressive, and it's just amazing how they put this stuff together. And so she was putting out some information. She's like, here, this is the person, you guys are starting this, talk to this person. She's awesome. She's been doing this for 4 or 5 years. Every time I've heard anybody who does this stuff with kids, it comes from her. I said, go talk to her. And that kind of stuff is just, it's really helpful for people. So yeah, it's amazing. Like you said, one of the things that you said that really that hit home with me is that you said the PD that I give is also PD that I'm getting. And I feel like every time that I go to give or provide professional development, I take back from that, whether it's improving the thing that I'm sharing or it's something else that someone's taught me while I was there, that there's always something that I can pull out of that.
Yeah. And that's my instructional practice. This summer I was voluntold that I'd be teaching a new grade level. So, I taught 7th grade history for 18 years and liked it. And so when I was moved to an 8th grade position in the same building and hard. So,
Welcome to the 19th century, right?
Yeah. So,
8th grade history, you're stepping right up, man.
Yeah, pictures now. So I'm teaching, U.S. history part 2, and all of it was part 1. So I became a master, honestly, of content for part 1, and now part 2, I'm, my content knowledge skills are not as good as I'd like them to be. So I'm growing with the students and relying more on my, workflow things I've learned. We do podcasting, we do game design, we do apply digital skills, so I can give them technical skills and coach kids individually, and things that I, maybe I wouldn't have done those if I didn't have a disruption, multiple disruptions in my plans, career. So, those disruptions or shifts in what we want versus what we get, they can lead to positive change. And I think it's all about how we frame it.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful piece of advice right there. I really think it is. And I usually kind of sum things up by asking for some kind of piece of advice for the viewers to listen to, people who are trying to work things out. And that just kind of nails it. Like, sometimes the disruptions make a huge difference in the way, and they kind of make it work. Your plans might not be, your plans aren't necessarily the right plans, So yeah, I absolutely love what you're doing. I love getting to see the stuff you put out there. You put out some fantastic stuff on a regular basis about all kinds of different things. So not just hilarious misspellings of your names on Starbucks and incredible photographs of the trips you take to Yellowknife and stuff like that, but also really great educational content as well. So let people know, just tell people who are listening how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out more about the things that you're doing and reach out to you when they want to talk to you.
Sure. So couple ways to reach out. My Twitter handle and my Gmail, they're both Micah Shippee. So it's at Micah Shippee and micahshippee@gmail.com.
So that's what is it's MYKACHP. You might need to spell this out based on all of the history I have seen. You might need to spell this out for people.
Well, Micah is MICAH, and Shippee is SHIPPE. So that is my Twitter handle, my Gmail, and my website. I have a book coming out this summer called Wanderlust EDU, A Guide to Innovation in Schools. And it's based on my experiences and things that I've seen work, people I've talked to, and research that I've done. My website has a form on it to reach out as well, and a lot of resources.
Yeah, so absolutely. Like I said, Micah just kind of scratched the surface of the stuff that he really does on a regular basis with teachers in the classroom. He was just sharing all of his story and his experience. You got to know who he is a little bit more. But the work he does, like you said, he did touch a little bit about paperless workflow and things like that. And then the work he does with emergent technology and augmented reality, you're going to find really good stuff there. So if those are things that you're interested in, you definitely want to reach out to Micah and find out more. Or if you just love the story that he told, check in with Micah, and you can bring him to your area for sure, because he's willing to travel, and he's off in August, so it's perfect. Bring him to your school, start the year off right, get the guy in there, and be on the lookout for Wanderlust EDU, because it's going to be full of good stuff. So, Micah, thanks again for being a part of the teacher's journey and sharing your story with everybody. And yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to great things from you in the future. So thanks again.